Ladies and gents, hello and a very warm welcome. My name's Aram and I may look a bit tired today. My sincere apologies. I had to play midwife yesterday. Our third child arrived 4 weeks early, pretty unexpected. Everything's perfect. And now I'm a bit wasted. You know what it's like. Okay. So anyway, I was asked to look at the U19 Men's 8, and I've looked at it before, and I thought, I don't know. I mean, yes, they're fast. The Germans are fast, and I like German rowing, and it's all great. But technique, I don't know. And then more comments kept on popping up and say, Aram, can you please look at the U19 8? And I said, are you sure? Because I'm not too fond of that. And I said, yeah. Anyway, I said, okay. So the entire story involves about Germany and Great Britain. And I also compared this with the U23 8. And it also involves a bit around the US. There are players on the side like the French. I think it's awesome to have a junior 8. China, very interesting, but they're pouring so much money into the system, it's unbelievable. And I think if they poured any more money into the system, it would just pop out. And well, that's essentially it. So the claim is very often is in an 8, the one who wins is right. And no, I don't think so. Especially not in junior rowing and very likely not in under 23 rowing. So what I'm going to talk about, look, this here. So the German style, it's very difficult to get a decent picture of that. The German style evolves around a very rapid upper body pivot at the catch. So they move the upper body, but that's too blunt. That's too bluntly said actually, because it's much more delicate than that. And I know the Germans are not, they're pretty accurate in what they do. So I reckon, I'm not sure, but I reckon there are thoughts behind this, either force curve work with this 8 or another 8 the coaches worked before. So I'm sure there went a lot of thinking into this, and I'm sure this doesn't happen by accident. And I also know that these 8s are put together pretty closely before the World. So it's not like this 8 has been together for a year and now they finally race. No. So a couple of weeks in advance, a couple of training camps, and then that's it. And in many federations, it's the same with the under 23s. You think it's all pro? No, it's not. So they essentially have to do their own training until they are selected and then put together during camps. Now the interesting thing about the Germans is that their early upper body rise is, I'm putting a lot of guesswork into this, and correct me, I'm so much looking forward to the comments already. But the idea is that you use an early upper body because the boat speed is so high. And of course in an 8 the boat speed is the highest, it's the fastest boat, makes sense. But why can't you do a nicer catch? By this I mean, why can't you just put the blade in the water in a more accurate way? And that's my point. If the blade work at the catch and the body position and posture at the catch were more accurate, there wouldn't be the need to use the upper body so swiftly to compensate for a lack of lock in the water. In other words, please don't see this as an advertisement because I really don't mean it to be, but would you have the same issue and would the same technique work with Randallfoils on top? And I'm very sure it wouldn't, because you didn't have the issue with the lock anymore. Now, if I followed my assumed argument, the assumed point that this early upper body motion is meant to create an early force peak, the result is that around perpendicular, the party's over. So there's not much more force. So for everybody who's not sure about what I'm talking about is at the catch, the moment you start to work with the upper body, your force goes up. But the idea about the stroke is that you want to sustain the force, create a plateau for at least a longer section of the drive. So you're at the catch, blade points away from the boat. Not a good idea to put a lot of force on the blade. With today's material, and that's the point I want to make later. And around perpendicular, then it pays, but you know, the point is, my assumed point that the German team was making, all right, the boat is so quick around perpendicular, there's not much acceleration possible. Okay, that's legitimate, and again, I might be wrong, you know, who says I'm right? It's just my 50 cents. And in my humble thinking, I would think, well, if you place the blade more accurately, didn't have, if you had less of a bounce at the catch, up and down, up and down, up and down, but an actually immediate hold in the water, Randall-foils, hashtag, then there wouldn't be need to put so much force on the blade to compensate for lack of lock. Now, the early peak, and I think that's the reason why they win. In junior rowing, I think they are more unified than everybody else. And again, if you unify something that, in my humble opinion, is per se inefficient, or not as efficient as it possibly could be, in a unified style, this is still much faster than anything else. If you have efficient, but individually efficient people in the other eights, by this I mean they are efficient individually, but they don't create the same influence on the boat. So if you look at the Germans, to me it looks like they're pretty much unified in the way they row. And it's a very easy style to convey and say, hey guys, just use your upper body very early at the catch. And it's actually smart. You know, in junior rowing you have them for a season, and that's actually a couple of weeks. So of course you pay to create success. So what do? You use a system that creates the quickest success. And what is easy to convey is, hey guys, just use the upper body right at the catch. If everybody does it, it pays off. It's not that simple. There's much more thinking behind it. And everybody who knows a bit about German rowing knows that there's a lot of thinking behind it. But at the same time, that it could be faster provided you had more seasons to build it up, because building up better technique takes more time. It takes months, at least months of doing this. Now, you can say, well, your 50 cents are your 50 cents, but the German 8 will become world champion, and the British will not be world champion, and the Americans will not be world champion. So okay, let's look at the British. That's one of the few shots we get of them. There's there are very few shots. That's the French. I like their style, by the way. Okay, British, and the British do something that's interesting. They have a slight motion in their seat before the blades are connected, but then they hold the back, and they do use the upper body early, but later than the Germans. So they're closer to perpendicular. See this now? Perpendicular is when the blade is in a 90-degree angle to the boat. So if I just reference the bowman of the British, this is actually a stroke that focuses around perpendicular. So next catch, look at the British here in the background. They pivot around perpendicular intentionally. So you see, I perceive this to be the case. There's a distinct difference of timing of when to use the upper body. Germans use them early, the British use them early, but a bit late. So they don't use them late past perpendicular or around perpendicular with the intention to keep the force curve going. It's more like, okay, we peak, but we peak around perpendicular. Makes sense. So they don't look for a plateau. The British, in my humble opinion, look for a peak around perpendicular, which is, I don't think it's efficient, but it makes more sense than what I see from the Germans. So if I had to compare force curves, the German would be an early peak and whoop, 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 and then you break off because, well, it's a fade out anyway. So this is why I think their finish looks a bit short. But if everybody does it, it pays off. And if you have the 8 strongest guys in the 8, well, this is going to work quite nicely. The British curve, to me, looks like a bit of a bell shape. So you would have a softer entry and a pronounced peak around perpendicular when the blade is in the best angle to propel the boat, which makes more sense because the blade is in a better angle to attack and move the boat. The reason why I think that, no, I don't think that. It's a possible explanation. The Germans are using that technique, or that coach used that technique, and maybe he can write something, you can write something if you listen to this, and then let me know what your thoughts are. But to me, it appears that this is the early force curve is a technique that works well with soft material, wooden oars, long oars, tall people, oars that enable you to store kinetic energy. But that's not the case with the carbon stuff we have here. Either A, the intention is to create a lot of energy and store kinetic energy in the boat and let him whip around perpendicular, which is, I believe, not working with the stiff carbon ores we have today. It's too direct. Force transmission is too direct. And the other option is there's, as a coach, you understand there is no way you can teach these athletes in a couple of weeks proper, super clean, synchronized blade work to have a quick connection, and you don't dare to use random foils, because what if I use something and we don't become world champion? Well, everybody will say you made a mistake because you made the wrong material choice. You know, that's scare thinking of, better not, better not try something new. What if it could work? And then the third option is that compensation, trying to compensate a lack of efficiency at the catch, blade work, body position, so they're actually directly in a position to have a quick force connection. And as this is not the case, you may be actually able to overcompensate with an early upper body pivot. And if everybody does it, and you sit the 8 strongest people in the boat, it is going to work. If everybody else is not more effective, more efficient, or weaker, or equally strong but not as well synchronized. So I think you've got to give credit to the German boat for finding a way to sync up a junior boat. It will not, I don't believe that this kind of technique is going to pay off all the way to the top level. But then you can say Germany performed super well at the Olympics. So in order to understand this better, I actually looked at the under 23 8 of the Germans, and they did not make a medal. So you say, oh, wait, okay, we put the weakest people in the German 8. But being in the under 23 8 of the Deutschland Achter, because you see that the boat has a different color, that's already part of the Deutschland Achter project of the Deutschland Achter Limited Liability Company GmbH. I still can't believe this. And it's not, it isn't peanuts to be in that boat. It is awesome. It's something everybody wants to be in, because it's the stepping stone to make it into the big 8. There are big rallies held so that everybody can be, that everybody's eager to get into that 8. So I believe they have very strong people in that 8. Now, that 8 didn't perform well at all for German standards. For Austrian standards, this would be huge, but it didn't happen. And they use a very similar technique. That's the only shot I've got of them. My apologies. See this? Early upper body, right at the catch, and a fade out at the finish. So if the technique, and I might be wrong, but if the technique itself were so superior to everybody else's technique, the question is, why is it that the British become, I think, 3rd or 2nd in the juniors, and they win in the under 23? Because I compared the British technique of under 23, you see them right there, here in the background. They row a pretty comparable style to their junior pendant. Pivot, intentional pivot around perpendicular. I mean, the bow pair usually has a bit of a different technique. Let's see if we can get a different shot. Here they are. A pretty pronounced upper body swing, upper body work. It's not a really swing work around perpendicular. Again, almost at the brink of doing nothing. So it appears to be, that's a glass of water analogy. So put a glass of water in your shoulder, make sure it doesn't spill. That's British rowing, and at the same time try to use the upper body around perpendicular. It appears to be counterintuitive and almost contradictory, but it actually works. Here you see them quite nicely. That's the British under 23 8. They're going to win. So Scott Cockle, congratulations, another gold under your belt. We should do the interview soon. What do you think? I just want to pick your brain about, what goes through your mind. What do you tell you guys? All right. So that's British 8. You see, it's not super well synced here. That appears to be a bit different. But again, the British are pretty good at what they do. I'm sure there went some thinking into this. They have a more solid leg drive and then a joined upper body swing around perpendicular. Their finish doesn't look as empty as the German finish does. But I'm sure the German finish isn't empty as well. But I believe there's a physical difference. All right, let's go back to the juniors 8. So that's junior 8 racing again. So here's the German 8 again. You see this? They use their upper bodies, junior 8, right at the catch and fade out at the finish. It's interesting. I hear that, you know, Germany, they've got issues. There are not enough juniors, and Germany is still dominating. I mean, winning the junior men's 8 is how much more dominant you want to be. So I believe there's a high proficiency of athletes in Germany. Now, the Americans, junior American 8. I don't see all of them. That's an issue. Well, what they do, they hold off. I studied them quite a while. So they hold off the upper body much longer. Look at him. I mean, this is great. You know, think, okay, now a solid upper body swing. No. And that is what made me think. So, okay, now would actually be the time to use your upper body weight. Upper body weight much stronger than arms. But they don't. They do a long leg drive merging into an arm pull. So it's again legs to arms only. So they're missing out on the most important part of the drive, which is the upper body swing using body mass. Rowing is all about leverage. You know, look at the Kiwi 8. They use quite a bit of leverage. It doesn't mean you have to have a lot of lean back like the Canadians had, you know, a couple many years ago. But it means that you should use leverage when it counts the most. And now this may not be a good representation. Let's look at somebody else in the US boat. Let's look at him right here. Bit of an empty seat motion at the catch. Interesting. He rows an upper body, early upper body rotation. Wow. See the bend here right now? Watch the shaft. Boom. And now moves down. So these two alone are not as well synced as the entire German 8. This is what I mean by if you sync something up that per se is not as effective but as something else, but everybody does it, it pays off. Now, what is the solution? If I were the US coach, what I would do, I would probably be naive and probably try to make everybody understand how to pivot around perpendicular. I'd probably have them sit on the bi rower and try to produce the same force curves under race conditions. So, okay, let's do your 2Ks and 5Ks on the bi rower and show me how your force curves develop when you become tired, when you are under high lactate influence. So I think with the Americans, as great as they rode, the little snippet I see here, it's unfair, but that's all I can see, is they are not as synced up and they don't use upper body leverage as well, not around perpendicular. So if you look at the French here in the background as a contrast, let's look at him right there. You see, leg drive, patience, upper body mass, and now the arms. This per se is what I would prefer. And now imagine everybody did it. And that's the tricky part. You need to make everybody understand how to do it. And I think a lot of people simply lack full range of motion strength in the pelvis. There are two videos I want to do. One video is things you need to be able to do outside the boat in order to be good inside the boat. And there are a couple of exercises, good mornings, overhead deep squats, all that stuff. If you can do this well, it's very likely you will have an easier time to get a good grasp of good technique in the boat, leverage. And the other video I want to do is how to get a quick force connection at the catch. It's not so much blade work. Yes, so this is a big part, but around 70% of that, I think, or 60% or 50, whatever you call it, is how you position your body. So another video in the pipeline. Good. Enough said about the Americans. I love you guys, but unfortunately I don't see everything here. Maybe I see a bit more here. Yeah, I see, using the upper body quite early. So I think generally speaking, the way you guys create force in that boat is too incoherent. I do believe you're all very strong in the erg, but the erg is not the boat. And the question is, how do you achieve certain wattage? And the how is exactly what makes the fine little difference in the boat. You know, force curves on that are not measured with the strain gauge and on a linear pulling device will never give you a proper answer. It's always an estimate, algorithm stuff. You need raw data in your training, not just for testing. But hey, the Americans make a medal. I don't know when Austria had a junior 8. But yeah, you're a small country. Slovenia is a small country too. They had awesome rowers in the past as well. Okay, now what is a pity that we don't get a decent shot of the British. All we get, and I think that's a very fine junior 8, is that background footage we have here. But to me, it seems that they row pretty much a comparable style to their under 23 counterpart. You see him here, hold off the upper body, pivot, finish, hold tension. Shoulder stability. What I love about the stroke guy is his shoulder stability. There's actually quite a good sequence at the start. It's a pity, it's such great racing. Another background image here of the British. You see him? Ooh, interesting. Where is he? 7 or 6? 6, yeah. Here, number 6 guy after British. You see how intentional he does the upper body swing. Right here. He actually throws his head around perpendicular. The closer he gets to perpendicular, the more he whips the upper body through. Shall I play it? Look at it. Wow. You wouldn't do this by nature unless somebody told you, a coach told you, and say, hey, I want you to swing hard around perpendicular. And this is what I believe I can see. If you look at the Germans here in the background, right there, do we see? Yeah, we see something. Look at him, for example. See, the upper body goes up right at the catch. It's a continuous upper body motion. It's legs, upper body, all the time together. All the time together. He doesn't do it. But he doesn't dare to use the upper body swing. I don't know what his technique is when he's not in his 8. But I reckon it's a different one. Yeah. My impression is that the German 8 was put together based on erg times. And then they tried to sync up the boat with an early upper body swing. So technique-wise, probably the British boat is the best. Again, in terms of syncing up. But the best of the top 3. But maybe the erg scores weren't as good as the German ones were. Who knows? It's a pity we don't get to see, for example, a Chinese 8 or the French 8. That would be very, very, very interesting. All right. But nevertheless, with this being said, congratulations to Germany. Look at the lead. The time is good. Varese had super rough conditions. 5:33. That's pretty spectacular. Congratulations to GB in the US. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm very much curious to learn what your 50 cents are. These are mine. I might be wrong, but sometimes it's the only way to learn, to put out your wrongness and say, hey, I'm not sure. What do you think? And so sometimes contacted by some of the coaches and say, hey, I'm the coach, we did this and that in a person, and I agree here, I disagree here, and then the interesting discussions start. Now, with this being said, if you know somebody who's interested, share the video. Help me grow the channel. We're close to 20,000 subs. I really want to cross the line very soon. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it's important for me. Please do that. I would appreciate it very much. Thank you. And with this being said, if you want to work with me, go to rmtraining.com. All the programs, live coaching sessions, video analysis packages are on there. Not sure what to take? Send me an email, info@rmtraining.com. With this being said, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye. Have a good day.